I'm Dr. Brian Crompton. I'm a pediatric oncologist at the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute. My research primarily focuses on identifying new approaches to treating Ewing's sarcoma. Ewing's sarcoma is an often devastating pediatric cancer, primarily affects adolescents and young adults. And the only real therapies for Ewing's sarcoma employ intensive chemotherapy, surgery, and radiation. And even with that, we're only curing about 75% of patients with Ewing's sarcoma. And that's despite several decades, it hasn't really improved in several decades of intensive research. So there are two main hurdles I think we need to overcome to improving outcomes for Ewing's sarcoma. One is to identify new drugs that are different than the traditional chemotherapies, but we also need to identify which patients are going to most benefit from additional therapies in Ewing's sarcoma. So with the help of Pediatric Cancer Research Foundation, we've begun to tackle some of these problems. A few years ago, we identified a protein whose activity is really important in Ewing's sarcoma proliferating and progressing. And so this protein called focal adhesion kinase, or FAK, when we inhibit it, really causes the Ewing's sarcoma cells to die and prevents tumor establishment. So we have now partnered with a major pharmaceutical company who has FAK inhibitors in early phase clinical trials, mostly for patients with adult types of cancers, to prove that their inhibitors are effective against Ewing's sarcoma, with the eventual goal of partnering with them in a clinical trial for patients with Ewing's sarcoma. We recognize that in general, using a single type of treatment, a single agent, is not going to be effective at curing cancer. And so we've also now screened a library of nearly 2,000 cancer drugs to identify things that might be potent combinations with FAK inhibitors for treating Ewing's sarcoma. And we've identified a class of drugs that, when combined with FAK inhibition, significantly impair tumor progression in Ewing's sarcoma. But the other problem still remains in that we're not sure which patients really would benefit most from these newer approaches to treating the disease. And so we're now working on developing a blood test that can be used to track response to treatment in Ewing's sarcoma. And the idea here is that we can draw a blood test at the beginning of treatment, and then while patients are on treatment, and use the DNA that's circulating in the blood that's released from the tumor itself as a measure of whether the tumors are responding good to therapy or not. Through this approach, we believe that we'll be able to determine which patients very early in therapy are doing well and which patients are not responding as we'd like. And that should give us the opportunity then for patients who are responding poorly to traditional therapy to add new drugs, add new therapies, and hopefully improve their outcomes so that at the end of the day, we've got new therapies to treat Ewing's sarcoma and really have improved outcomes for patients with this disease. So I'd like to thank the Pediatric Cancer Research Foundation for supporting this work and look forward to an exciting partnership with them in the future.